It's early April and it's time to get our spuds in the ground. But you may be wondering, how do you grow and plant potatoes without digging the soil? So in today's video, I'm going to show you how it's done. There are three different types of potatoes: first earlies, second earlies, and your main crops. The first earlies you plant around the end of March, beginning of April, and then 2 weeks later you plant your second earlies, and then a couple of weeks after that you'll plant your main crops. When buying potato seeds, you want to make sure that you know what kind of potato you're getting to roughly when you're planting it. It doesn't matter a great deal, but it helps with planning when they're going to harvest, so you have a continuous cycle of harvest throughout the season. And this year I am going to plant some really late to hopefully crop around November, December time, because I find that now at this time of the year our potatoes are just starting to finish and there's going to be another 2 or 3 months until we have any potatoes. So I'm thinking that if I can plant some later crops, harvest them in December, they'll be still good in store now. Potatoes don't grow from seed like normal plants. When you buy potatoes, you'll buy seed potatoes, and they are basically last year's potato that has started to grow sprouts. You'll probably notice this in your cupboards when you buy potatoes. So once the potato that is full of starch starts turning its starch into sugars, it signals to the plant inside that it needs to start growing in order to make new potatoes. So that's why you'll find once your potatoes have sat in the cupboard for a bit, they start to sprout. Now these are my second early potatoes, but I'm going to take you back 2 weeks to when I planted my first early potatoes in containers. It's time to plant the first earlies. It's currently the 21st of March, so it's bang on the equinox. These are my first early potatoes, a variety called Rocket, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. They grow like a rocket. I'm going to plant them in containers, so I'll show you how I do it. Containers are a great way to grow potatoes if you've not got much space, because they take very little looking after. You can keep them at the back of your patio, out the way, a little bit of water here and there, and in a couple of months you've got a bucket full of potatoes ready to harvest. So let's put some in some containers. So what we're going to do is, I've got these containers. It doesn't matter, you can use any kind of container or sacks. You get potato sacks as well, or you can even use an empty compost bag, turn it inside out so the black side's on the outside, and grow them in that. They really are a versatile plant. They'll grow in absolutely anything. But I've got these containers and they have a reservoir in the bottom, so it just means I don't have to water as much. So that sits in there, and then obviously the bottom section, it's like about 50 millimeters. That can fill it with water and stay in there, and then the roots will draw it up, and it just means less watering. So they're really handy. But all we're going to do is put about 3 inches worth of compost in the bottom, just enough for the potato to sit on. And then with a pot this size, I'd probably put 3 seed potatoes in. Push them in a little bit, not too much. You don't want them to be too close to the bottom. And then literally just cover them up with soil. So they're nicely covered. And then what they'll do is they'll sprout up out of that, the leaves will. And as the leaves get to like 2 or 3 inches, I will then apply another layer of compost. And what that does is it increases the amount of roots in the soil. And the more roots you have, the more potato tubers you'll have on the end. So every 3 or 4 inches it grows, a fresh layer of compost on the top, and keep doing that until it gets to the top, and then you let it grow out. But that's pretty much it. What I'll do with this is I'll just give it a little water, not too much, just to moisten the soil. Little tap down, and these will stay in the polytunnel for the next few weeks until I need the space in here, and that'll give them a bit of a more of a fighting chance because it's a bit warmer in here. And if we are due a frost, I'll put a fleece over the top of them just to protect them from the frost. Potatoes don't die from the frost, but it does affect the top leaves, which will slow down the growth. That's all 5 pots done. And like I said, they'll stay in the polytunnel now for about 3 or 4 weeks until I start needing the space for the pepper plants. And then they can go outside. But if there was to be a frost, I'll cover them up with a fleece just to keep them a bit of extra protection. But these were planted on the 21st and they'll be ready to harvest by the end of May, beginning of June. And from each tub, I'll expect to get about 2 bags of potatoes, like your average bag that you get from the shop. And that'll probably last, like, each bag lasts a couple of weeks in our house, 1 to 2 weeks. So it's like 2 months worth of potatoes there. And the taste is phenomenal. Now we're going to do the second earlies, which are going to go in the bed just outside the polytunnel, which had the compost on from last year's hotbed. Before we go outside and plant the second earlies, I just want to quickly show you the progress of these first earlies. We have a bit of sproutage. It's only been 2 weeks since I planted these and they're already starting to sprout, which is a good sign. So without further ado, let's go and plant some spuds. So I've got my second early seed potatoes. This is a variety called Charlotte. Now I grow this for my main crop as well because it's such a good all-rounder. Like if you look at the size of some of these tubers, that's a great jacket potato. But then on the other hand, you've got perfect new little potatoes. So I'll just grow this as my second early and my main crop, so I have a continuous supply because they store really well and I've got on great with these. But these have been chitting in the greenhouse for about 2 weeks and they're all just starting to send little sprouts out. So these are ready to go in the ground. Now I have prepped the bed behind me. I've given it a good rake out to try and break any big lumps up. And then I went over it and firmed it down with my feet. And that's the other good positive about no dig. You can walk on the bed and it doesn't disturb the soil structure. Firming it down is not compacting it. It's just taking out any air pockets that if it was to rain and water was to fill it up, and then with it being so early on in the year, it could still freeze and damage the roots. So let's get planting. I've laid them out 50 centimeters apart in either direction, and that'll give enough space for each plant and it will fill the bed. Now with no dig potatoes, you're not planting it really deep, you're just planting it right at the base of the original soil level. So at the bottom of the compost layer, but at the top of the soil. And then that will send roots into the soil and into the compost, and your potatoes will grow all in the air, the top surface of the compost, resulting in an easier harvest, a cleaner harvest, and a bigger harvest. So what we do is we get a trowel and just making a little slit in the compost layer, move the compost out of the way, and then you'll see the top of the soil level. Then we're just going to pop the potato in the hole and cover it up. Give it a slight firming down, and that's it. Same again with this one. It's a little bit of a smaller potato, so it'll be easier. But just go as deep as you can without affecting the soil. Pop it in, firm down, and we're away. Just a few more left to do, and I'll tell you a bit about the aftercare while I'm doing it. So same with the ones in the containers. Once they get about 4 to 6 inches growth on them, I will then cover them up with some compost to create a mound over the top. Now potato plants are frost hardy, but the frost will damage the leaves and it will hinder the growth of the potato plant. So you do want to keep the frost off them. So it doesn't matter if you plant them a little bit later than I have, but I'll just cover them up for the first couple of weeks with compost. Then once they start growing a little bit more, I'll cover them with some more compost, which will give us about 4 weeks. And then for the last kind of 2 weeks until our last frost date in the middle of May, I will put a fleece over the top just to protect them from the frost. Now you'll notice that I've only done half of the bed, and that's because in 2 weeks I will plant the rest of the bed out, and it will just mean that we're not getting lots of potatoes all at once. They can stay in the ground a little bit longer. And with these second earlies, they take about 2.5 months to grow. So depending on the weather, they should be ready for harvest around the beginning of June. But you can always pull some up a little bit earlier and they'll just be a little bit smaller potato, but that's totally fine with me. So we have my first earlies that will crop kind of beginning of May, middle of May. Then there'll be these. Then there'll be the patch in front, and then I have another bed that I've kept free that I will plant another load in 4 weeks after this. So this, then 2 weeks on these ones, and then 2 weeks on them ones. And we should get a nice continuous harvest all the way through the summer. And like I said before, I'm going to plant some around August, July, August. I'm not too sure because it's the first time I've done it, but I'm going to have a test. I might do half a bed in July, half a bed in August, and see if we can get a late crop around November, December time. Some fresh Christmas spuds. So yeah, there's nothing really much to do with the potatoes. They're so easy to grow. You just whack them in and let them do their thing. They don't require much water. I just water them when the plants are fully grown and the flowers are on them. That's a sign that they're starting to create tubers underground. So that's a good time to give them water. And another good thing to look at is, because we're growing it in the compost in the top, sometimes the potatoes will just stick out the top a bit and it will make them turn green because they hit the light. So you're best just to chuck some compost on top around the plant so you can't see any of the potatoes, and it will protect your crop. That's the potatoes all planted up for now. I'll plant this second half out in 2 weeks, but there's no need for me to show you that because it's exactly the same process as the other ones. If there's one vegetable I'd encourage you to grow, it's definitely potatoes, because you can't match the taste from shop bought ones, and they're so easy to grow. You just put them in the ground and literally leave them, and then in 2.5 months you'll have bags and bags of potatoes that you don't know what to do with. Most garden centres and Home Depot kind of shops all sell seed potatoes, and they'll have them on the shelves now. So get out there and get some and put some in some containers and enjoy some homegrown spuds. The sun is blaring today. It has been all week. I apologise for my frown. Maybe should stand away from the sun, but then you can't see my face. So you just have to put up with my frown for now. I need to put some shades on. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.